Well, have there been some developments in women's football since we last spoke? Silverware for Manchester United, Viv Miedema leaving Arsenal, plus the final round of WSL fixtures are looming. We'll talk about all this and more in today's show. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome back. You can see familiar, unfamiliar faces on the panel today, basically becoming our regular substitutes, but obviously on All for Wofo we like to talk about finishers and starters, not substitutes. These are clearly impact subs who are coming in during the end of the season to offer a boost of energy to the show. How are we? We'll start with Sean as one of our newer guests or faces in the room.
Yes, weird being on this side of it. Very happy to be on. I hope to be the Stina Blackstenius of this whole Impact Subs thing. And I know I'm sharing the screen with 3 Arsenal fans, and I'm just very sorry. I'm sure we'll get onto it, but I'm here to cheer you all up.
I appreciate it. Polly, how are we?
Do you know what? I'm 9.5 out of 10 because of the earlier news. That's knocked down 0.5. But other than that, I'm absolutely on cloud 9. I'm buzzing. Great.
Brilliant. We've got two Stina Blacksteniuses there then. And Meg, how are we? You are our stalwart Lotta Womenmoy, I've heard.
I'm devastated after today's news. It still hasn't sunk in, but yeah, apart from that, I'm all good.
Well, we will be getting into that, but first of all, we'll do a quick roundup. Of course, you can catch more of the lowdown on All for United, which is well worth a watch, but not now. You've got to wait for this show to finish and then head over there, or welcome here if you are catching us after that show, which I'm sure a lot of people will be. But yeah, so Sean and Polly, you were both there. Sean, you're in the Tottenham section, and then Polly covering it for media. Meg, we were both at home watching it remotely, shall we say. But how was the atmosphere for those you two that were there? How was it as a day out? What did you make of the final and of the experience, I guess?
As sort of fan perspective, it's my first ever time to Wembley, so I just the whole surprised with how big it is. Like on screen, it looks like it looks kind of big, and then you get there and you're like, wow, it is absolutely massive. And no, it's a really good atmosphere. So many people there, loads of different shirts. Arsenal shirts was very confusing up Wembley Way, but no, getting in there, really good atmosphere on both sides. The Tottenham fans, for the first 45 minutes at least, were brilliant. The trumpet was going. But as soon as the goal started going, it got a bit quiet. But no, overall, from a fan perspective, it was a really good day. And I really enjoyed it.
Bro, and Polly, from a bit more of a press perspective then, what was your experience? What did you make of the game itself? And maybe do we need a bit more competition in finals?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was my first time in the Wembley press box. I've only ever been as a fan before. And it was an interesting one because the actual game I don't think was very good as a final. The first half was quite dead, and then of course you had the Ella Toon goal just before half time, which it felt like it picked the atmosphere up a little bit because the atmosphere was a bit weird. But then the second half, you kind of knew United were going to win, and Spurs fans started leaving and things like that, and so it wasn't kind of the close final that sometimes you get on these occasions. So that was a little bit weird, but just the general day was absolutely fantastic. And there's just something so special about the FA Cup final because, particularly because it's so near the end of the season, it does feel like a bit of a celebration of the season that's gone by. And I thought there were some really good performances, particularly by Garcia. I thought obviously Toon with her goal was fantastic. So it was just nice, I think, particularly as well, saw a lot of United fans after. And after their very turbulent season, it was actually nice to see some of them smiling for once because normally I just have to deal with their sad faces. So that was a nice change.
Yeah, absolutely. And we obviously saw a new winner, 2 new finalists, in fact. Of course, we did see a bit of maybe a one-sided final, but that's going to happen as we see more and more of these teams actually getting that experience in Wembley. And the hope is that next time out, they'll be slightly more competitive. They'll have that experience under their belt. Throwing this out to everyone, just, I guess, we've been through it before, but just how important is it to have new faces on the scene, those teams getting that experience, and more teams becoming more competitive?
I think it's so important. I think it really shows overall how competitive sort of teams are becoming, because obviously, you know, for example, if you look at the WSL in the past few seasons, obviously Chelsea have pretty much dominated, and then it's been Arsenal, and then sort of Man City and United sort of, you know, have been your top four for the past few seasons. But the fact that, you know, Tottenham have made it to the final, and for example, Liverpool are sat in fourth at the minute, we've not really seen that in the past few seasons. And, you know, the fact that Spurs made it to a final really goes to show that competitiveness is paying off, not just in the WSL, but it's allowing teams to sort of maybe have more belief that they can go further in these cups, like the Conti Cup. I mean, obviously it was a Chelsea-Arsenal final in the Conti Cup, but for example, in the FA Cup, obviously, yeah, we had 2 new finalists. So that alone goes to show that competitiveness is, you know, is obviously on the rise. And hopefully, you know, we don't see Chelsea, Arsenal, Man City, you know, every year as those finalists. Obviously, as fans of Arsenal, we'd love to always see them in there. But, you know, for the competitiveness of the game, you'd love to start to see, you know, your Liverpools again, you know, Spurs again, someone else, you know, in those finals, you know, and maybe even see like championship teams push further on in the competition, like making quarterfinals and semi-finals. So, yeah, no, it's really exciting, I think.
Yeah, I guess the cliche is the magic of the cup, and I think Trebuchet kind of agreeing with that point there in terms of, yes, it was a bit of a damp squib, not the best final, but we are seeing new finalists, and that is a positive, even if kind of Spurs did let it get to them on this occasion. Talking of increased competitiveness and in women's football, we'll move on to the WSL, because we are, of course, approaching our final round of fixtures. I think, firstly, like, just from everyone, Meg, maybe starting with you, a bit of a reflection on this season as a whole in the WSL. How has it shaped up for you? How have you found it? What have been, I guess, maybe your highlights, and what are you most excited for from the weekend? Choose whichever one of those questions you want to take, and we can move it around to hopefully get a nice spread of perspectives. As
a whole, I think it's been, you know, so much more exciting than, you know, previous seasons. I remember, I mean, obviously Arsenal didn't have a great opening day losing to Liverpool at the Emirates, but I remember, I think after 2 or 3 games, you know, the top, like Liverpool had won all their games, Leicester had won all their games, and they were sitting at the top of the table. Obviously, I think everyone sort of knew that wouldn't be the case, you know, for the whole of the season, but it was just sort of exciting to see those teams sort of get a string of results, really. And obviously, it is going to the last day of the season between Chelsea and Man City, and obviously, I mean, I really couldn't call it, but no, it's been really exciting and sort of see the likes of Spurs and Liverpool improved massively on where they were last season. You know, yeah, massively exciting, and hopefully, you know, we'll see who lifts the trophy on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sean follows Brighton, Bristol quite closely. How have you found, I guess, we have seen Bristol just go straight back down. How have you found the kind of bottom end of the table? Has that been as competitive as you hoped it would be? Obviously, Bristol have actually shown quite a lot of strength, even though it's not reflected in points. What have been your take on that bottom end?
I think at one stage it was quite exciting. You didn't really know what way it was going to go, because there was that Bristol and West Ham were very, I think, 1 point behind each other, even level on points at one stage, and that was exciting. But then I think West Ham came to Ashton Gate 1-2-0, and you already thought that was that. And when West Ham can sign Katrina Gorry, Zadorsky, Mewis, Bristol City just don't have that pull. And as soon as that sort of January window happened, you thought, oh, this could be the end of it. And that's how it's played out. I mean, I do think they're a good team. I think Lauren Smith is an excellent manager who does have a really bright future ahead of her. I think they will bounce straight back up, if I'm honest. She's stressed all throughout this season, whatever happens, this is a big plan. They knew relegation could be a possibility, and most of the squad do want to stick together, which is a really big point, because they have some really good young players in particular. So it was exciting for a little bit, but then we've just got this. You've had Bristol City, then the middle table, where my team Brighton are. It's been an unforgettable season. Yeah. I mean, we scored 7 goals this season in a game. I mean, that in itself is a rarity. So bit of a mixed season, but yeah, I would have liked the bottom to be more exciting, but it is what it is at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And Polly, I guess from you, what we've seen maybe some underperformers. We're talking about Manchester United obviously having that success in the cup, but in the league very much not the same. And Arsenal would have probably hoped to have been closer to that title race at this point when we're looking further up the table, and we're mid-table as well. Obviously, I think Leicester's maybe overperformed. Who are maybe some of the standout overperformers and underperformers for you this season, and can that change on the final day?
Well, yeah, we've mentioned Liverpool and Spurs already. I think Liverpool have been absolutely fantastic. What Matt Beard has done there is brilliant, and likewise Spurs. In terms of underperform, you could argue Aston Villa. The one caveat I will give to that is the fact that I think they actually overperformed last season, and so the expectation for them was a lot higher. And I reckon the same thing will happen to Liverpool and Spurs next season. I think they'll be better than they traditionally have been, but I don't think it's realistic to say, you know, they're going to completely maintain that, because other teams get better as it goes on. And, you know, teams such as United and Arsenal, who I know have like dropped points to Liverpool, for example, that potentially might not happen next season. I think the interesting thing about this season, I really felt it earlier with the Viv announcement, is that it properly feels like the end of an era. And I'm not quite sure what that era is, but it's definitely the end of something, because of course when we found out Emma Hayes was leaving Chelsea, that was a huge moment. And yeah, she's been a huge part of the WSL. But then it just feels like a lot of very significant players are leaving their clubs or leaving the league, or retiring and things like that. And so it does feel that when we come back in September, October time, it will be very different. And that's sad in a lot of ways. But it's also quite exciting because we've had so many new players come to the league over the last season, who potentially could, you know, go on and become club legends or league legends. So that's quite exciting. But it feels like it's been a little bit of a strange season, and a lot of stuff has happened that I really wouldn't have predicted.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting point you make. It's almost like the end of the Chelsea dynasty. And I think you can almost, woo, but also I think you can fit maybe the Viv departure into that if we kind of take the City links. We'll come on to this and maybe a little bit more and go deeper, but I think that if that signing goes ahead, that could be quite interesting for the future of the league and maybe who takes the reins from Chelsea. But as I said, I'll go into that later. Sean, just a quick question for you here from Trebuchet regarding Turland. Do you know anything on that? Is it any confirmation or speculation otherwise?
I did see one source say a contract was up this summer, but I think there is a year left on it. I think Brighton would love her to stay, but if there's 1 year left, I can't imagine she would sign a new deal, especially because we don't know who the manager will be next season. I do think she could be gone this season for a good fee, but the one I'm worried about, Katie Robinson's out of contract this summer as well. The club have been very quiet on whether she's in talks or anything like that. So I think she could be one to depart. And I think there would be a higher-end WSL club very interested in signing Katie Robinson.
Yeah, definitely. There'll be some... I think this transfer window, talking of it being a bit of a weird season, I think this transfer window could also be like super exciting in terms of if you're interested in a lot of outgoings. It could be super scary as well, depending on who you support. But yeah, let's get into the upcoming weekend a little bit more. Trebuchet mentioning both the Premier League and WSL titles relying on Spurs results is a bit funny. Of course, Chelsea are playing Tottenham this week, midweek. It's their game in hand. I think let's dig into that one a little bit, and maybe also Chelsea's final game of the season. They've got to travel away to Old Trafford, Manchester United, which is a huge game. It's being played at Old Trafford, right? I got that right. Yeah. Okay, good. I had the scary, like, what is it, LSV? I know, I'm pretty sure it's definitely Old Trafford for the end of the season, which I think actually does change it a little bit, maybe away from United's favour. But yeah, we'll go around. We'll go Polly, Sean, and then Meg this time. Just follow on from each other. What are your maybe predictions? What do you think? Do you think Chelsea can go and win it? Do you think they're in their stride now? They're going to do it for Emma Hayes, or They've wobbled in all the other competitions, and City are looking okay. What do we think from a Chelsea perspective in those final remaining fixtures?
It's a difficult one because on paper, you think City have the easier route. They've got one game to play, and that's Aston Villa. Chelsea, on the other hand, have got 2 games. They've got Spurs and United. So you think it's the easier route for City. But honestly, I reckon Chelsea love the challenge. They love a challenge, and I think they'll rise to it. I think the fact that, and well, Emma Hayes said it, and I know she's kind of been like, oh, yeah, I said that, but I didn't mean it, that she was like, oh, it's over. They realised that actually they could come back from this. And I think they're going to be so desperate not to kind of fumble their second chance that I reckon they might go on and do it. I mean, it's good you mentioned about Old Trafford and LSV, and that just won't work in United's favour. United don't have a good record at Old Trafford. I don't think there'll be a massive crowd there. I think they'll struggle. If it was at LSV, that's intimidating for teams to come to. And yeah, I'm not optimistic that United could beat Chelsea on the final day. I think it's also weird that they're coming up against Spurs and United, who obviously have played this cup final. And on one hand, yeah, United might be really buzzing that they've won, but they might also be absolutely knackered because they put a lot into the final. Similarly with Spurs, okay, maybe it pushes them onto, we'll finish the league strong, but also they're also probably knackered and are really gutted by Wembley. So it's a little bit of a difficult one, but I think Chelsea will do it because, yeah, they've got the kind of motivation of Emma Hayes. They've also just got the motivation. They're a team that love winning and are used to winning, and suddenly they're not winning things. And yeah, they're going to want to post those end of season photos with the trophy rather than, disappointed with that one.
I think if you asked Emma Hayes, what's your ideal scenario from the FA Cup final? Spurs getting battered, Man United on a high would be incredibly high on their list. You go into that Tottenham game in midweek, and that's a tough defeat to come back from. I think Amy James Turner said after the game it was an embarrassment. And to come off that Wembley experience, a 4-0 defeat, that's a lot to turn around in a couple of days. Given Chelsea have had a week and a half to prepare for these games as well, that's a huge boost for them. And then going into Old Trafford and United, I mean, they might still be hungover. We don't know. They'll be on such a high. But by the time Saturday comes around, everything would have lulled down. How do you pick yourself up for a game against Chelsea when you've played basically your season in one game at Wembley? And I think all those factors, I just think Chelsea are going to breeze through. They're going to absolutely find it really easy, dare I say, and I think they'll be lifting the title at Old Trafford.
In all honesty, I mean, if Chelsea hadn't have beaten Bristol 8-0, I would probably say that Man City, are going to lift it because of, they had a massive goal difference increase. But now that, that gap isn't there anymore, and Chelsea have got 2 games and Man City have only got 1 game, if they hadn't have scored 8 past Bristol, I mean, Chelsea still would have had 2 opportunities to sort of make up that goal difference, but it wouldn't have been, as simple maybe. But the fact that they've put 8 past them, and I think they're now they've got a 1 better goal difference than City now. City are probably going to beat Villa by, maybe quite a few goals, but I think Chelsea will score enough over the 2 games against Tottenham and United to, unfortunately, lift the trophy. But I think out of the 2 games, I think the Spurs game will actually probably be the tougher one for Chelsea, purely because I think Spurs will really, really want to end the season on a high after the final, purely because they have had a really excellent season in the WSL, to their standards. So they will really want to give their fans sort of, an end of the season to, be proud of, in a sense. Obviously, Grace Clinton will be back in the side. She won't be, team tied or cup tied. So, yeah, no, it'll be really interesting. But I think the harder one for Chelsea will definitely be Spurs. I think, yeah, as we said, United haven't got a good record against Old Trafford. It obviously started flooding on Sunday. So, but no, I think, yeah, if it was at LSV, United would probably be able to intimidate Chelsea more. But yeah, as as Polly was saying, Chelsea know how to win. You know, they've been winning for so long now. As much as I probably would, you know, after, you know, losing the Conti Cup final, after losing the FA Cup semi-final, after, you know, falling out of the Champions League, a lot of people have probably said, you know, they'll then, you know, crumble at the league. But yeah, I think because of what Emma Hayes has done for Chelsea, I do think the players will have it in them just to, you know, lift that final trophy with Emma Hayes.
Yeah, it's interesting that as well, because we say do it for Emma Hayes, and City have got the prospect of playing Carla Ward in her last game at Aston Villa. And I'm wondering, will we even potentially see City drop away more than we expect? Trebuchet mentioning City only beat Villa 2-1 back in December, so that was a closer game than you might anticipate from the form Villa have been in this season. And, you know, they're playing for their manager in the same way we're kind of talking about Emma Hayes. And Carla Ward's legacy in the game is also very, very strong. And I think it's also, just to mention as an aside, it's quite interesting that both of them are kind of leaving their roles due to them being mothers, and you don't ever hear a male manager leave his role from being a father. That's a one to think over for people. But I think moving on to City a little bit then, we'll go Sean, Meg, Polly. And I think maybe we'll integrate a little bit of talk, because we've obviously spoken about how we think Man United are definitely going to lose. But will there be a sense of pride in making sure they finish fourth? Liverpool are travelling away to Leicester, which isn't necessarily an easy game. Will they still have that fight, or is it the season over for them because of the FA Cup final? So we've got two angles you can approach here. Either take the City angle of can they crumble away more, or Liverpool and United, that fourth, fifth spot is still open. If United win and Liverpool don't get the full points, they can regain that third spot, fourth. How do you see those two little battles going? Sean, then Meg, then Polly.
I don't know what to think about City. I don't know what. Obviously, you go into a mentality thinking you're going to win, and they're one of the top three, the traditional top three. They will go in with a winning attitude, but it's just they'll know. There'll be that niggling feeling in the back of their heads. Oh, it may not be enough, whatever we do, because if they win, that might be it. And I think that's the really difficult middle ground they're in. I do think they've got a blip in them. We've seen it against Arsenal. They only beat Villa by a small margin. Brighton managed to beat them in Manchester. So there is something about them that screams there may be a little bit of complacency. But we've seen that with Chelsea as well, so it can happen to anyone. But I really don't know what to expect from that Villa game. I do think Villa will be up for it. I do think they want to send Carla Ward off with the best way possible by beating one of the big teams at Villa Park. That would be a great way to send her off. But yeah, from City, I really don't know what to expect. And then United, Liverpool, I don't know how United can find that energy after Sunday to just pick themselves back up for. It is still a big game on Saturday. I just don't know how they're going to recover that quickly and in time, to be honest.
No, I mean, it's so hard to call. I mean, when Bunny Shaw, obviously, you know, in season-ending injury, I thought, oh, maybe City might slip up here. Not slip up, but, you know, struggle to, you know, score as many goals. Obviously, they then put 4 past Bristol, and obviously no disrespect for Bristol, but it's obviously the team that, you know, other teams have been able to put a lot of goals past. Obviously, we saw Chelsea put 8 past them. So I don't know, because then obviously City faced Arsenal, and it did prove to be, you know, obviously Lauren Hemp got the goal up until the 89th minute, and City probably thought they'd won that game, and then Stina Blackstenius does what Stina Blackstenius does. But in terms of whether, I mean, obviously United will really want top 4. But I think, because obviously a lot of Man United fans aren't Mark Skinner's biggest fan. So I feel like if they had a manager that they, you know, felt more connection to, they'd want it more for that reason. Like they'd want that top 4 spot more. Like, for example, you know, if they had like Carla Ward, you know, I wouldn't see why, you know, fans would, you know, dislike Carla Ward. So if they had someone who they really felt that connection to, they'd maybe want that top 4 spot more. I mean, if Liverpool get that top 4 spot, I mean, obviously we can all say it's an overachievement, but I mean, Matt Beard completely deserves it for what he's done. But Liverpool-Leicester, I'd probably say, is a very evenly matched game. This, you know, from what both sides have done this season, they've both, as I said, probably overachieved in the sense of where they've, you know, where they are in the league at the minute. But yeah, it's so hard to call. But yeah, as much as City are without Bunny Shaw, you know, they've still got, you know, Lauren Hemp, Chloe Kelly. They have Mary Fowler up front, and obviously Mary Fowler isn't, you know, your Bunny Shaw, but she still got 2 of the goals against Bristol. And, you know, I think she's a sensational striker. I think the fact that City have her as a backup striker, anyone would snatch Mary Fowler up as, you know, their first choice striker. So, no, I don't think City will fumble necessarily, but yeah, I think they will just, unfortunately, not, you know, get enough goals, because they would have to just score a ridiculous amount of goals if it, you know, if Chelsea didn't fumble against Spurs or United. But yeah,
I was going to say City Aston Villa has always been quite a like close game the last couple of seasons. It's been a bit of a weird one, so I reckon it will be difficult for City. It won't be a complete walkover. So yeah, and then I guess you add the narrative of Carla Ward in, that just adds a little bit for the Villa players. But it's at Villa Park, so I think that'll be interesting. I don't know what sort of ticket sales have been like, because yeah, I mean, I think Villa play relatively well at Villa Park. It's a decent venue, but yeah, and the thing about City is they can be such a good team. They can be so dangerous, and then sometimes they can completely fumble it. Particularly, I was thinking about the Arsenal game the last week or the week before. I don't even know what day it is anymore. Where, you know, they look so strong and they were the best side and then fumbled it and conceded those 2 goals. And so, yeah, I'm intrigued to see what happens. And I was considering going to that game, actually. I'm going to United Chelsea instead, because I reckon I'll see a trophy lift there instead. But then in terms of the position in the league as well, with Liverpool and United, I don't know. I do think that Liverpool will finish ahead of United. I think it's an interesting one, given that there's like this traditional top 4, which will now get broken, and I quite like that for the league. But I also think the United players would never like admit to this, and I don't think this is necessarily true. But it's almost like they've won the FA Cup, like not forget everything else. I mean, yes, they've still got 1 game, but you know, they're going to be knackered, and very understandably, and they've got the silverware secured. That's going to be the big headline of the season, that they've made history and won the FA Cup for the first time. I don't think people are really going to remember if they finish 5th or whatever. I don't think that's going to be the big story from the season. And I think they're quite lucky in that sense, because if they didn't win the FA Cup, then that would very much be the narrative of, you know, it's been an awful season for your side. So yeah, I think it's probably one of the best poised final days we've had for a while, just because I remember at the start of the season seeing United, Chelsea, and at the time I thought, oh, maybe this could be the actual decider between the 2 sides. Obviously, that is not how it's gone. But the fact that you've got 2 games where there could potentially be a winner, the trophy is going to have to be in between Birmingham and Manchester at a motorway service station somewhere. I think that's absolutely brilliant, and that is what I love about the WSL.
Yeah, no, you're completely right. Someone in Stoke will be carefully like starting to etch something in the trophy. But yeah, we've got Justin kind of saying the opposite of United having kind of just forgotten about the league because they've got their narrative in the FA Cup, and saying actually this will push them past Chelsea. It's about momentum, which is a good point. And Emily is saying that she thinks that Man City will win it because the ball's still in their court. Although I'd have to say, I think maybe it's in Chelsea's a little bit more, just because it's up to them to falter, even though they have 2 matches to falter in. But yeah, super interesting. And I think we'll move on a little bit now, and going back to something Meg said, about Mary Fowler and Bunny Shaw both being superb options for Manchester City. We did, of course, have the news today that Viv Miedema is not going to have her contract renewed. This is a touchy subject for many people. I have my wrong way, it's mirrored. I can't get this right. My Miedema shirt behind me, and I've got my Dutch shirt on. But it's sad news. I think really it should be for any fan, because just what Viv Miedema has brought to the league and how good she has been, to see that kind of era over, as Polly was speaking about, is just a sad thing in and of itself. But we add to that the rumours that there's a potential move to Manchester City on the cards, and the prospect of that team next season with a rumoured 3-5-2 formation, Bunny Shaw and Viv Miedema up front in the same attack, supplied by Jill Roord, Jess Park, Lauren Hemp, Chloe Kelly. Do we even need to continue? But we will. Meg, how do you feel about the potential of facing that City side, and then also reaction to Viv?
I mean, my reaction to Viv was, I didn't get it, because obviously I straight away went on Twitter and sort of saw what everyone else was saying. Even let her, reach her full potential after recovering from her ACL. Obviously, she had to have another knee operation. She came back for a bit and then had to go off again. And obviously she scored that worldie of a goal against Liverpool. But, that's pretty much all we've kind of seen since she's come back from her injury. And I thought she was older than 27. I had to look this up earlier, but she's still 27. And to me, that's still quite young, in football. I mean, that's probably where players kind of, I guess, hit their prime, 26, 27. I mean, these days, players tend to hit their prime a lot earlier. But no, I mean, I'm just distraught. But then I wasn't shocked when the rumours came that she was staying in the WSL. Because obviously, with Beth and, because I'm sure that was a factor, she wouldn't want to just leave the country, I guess. Kind of like when Christy Mewis came over, it was good for Sam Kerr sort of thing. But I mean, the fact that she's moving to essentially a rival, because Man City are a massive rival of Arsenal in the WSL, it is a really scary prospect because of how many forward players and how many, I'd say, probably world-class forward players Man City have, like Lauren Hemp, Chloe Kelly, like Bunny Shaw. They're all world-class names. And it's just such a scary prospect. As much as I would love, as much as I will hope that Chelsea, with Emma Hayes going, I don't want them to, start doing bad, but it is going to be good to see, the rise of another team. And, maybe that will be Man City. It does sound, especially if they, sign some other, crazy players in the summer, then, I think we will certainly see Man City are already scary as it is. They seem to always be able to put so many goals past most teams. But it's a really scary prospect. But I mean, obviously, I'm happy she's staying in the WSL, so I can sort of, keep tabs on her, still, watch all the games that she plays in. But it is heartbreaking. Like 7 years at a club, and she's the WSL's record goal scorer, and 6 goals and 4 assists in one game against Bristol City. I'll always remember that, because who gets 6 goals and 4 assists in a game? Like, that's just crazy. And that 2018-19 season, just goes down in WSL history.
Yeah, it does feel like whoever's made this decision at Arsenal feels like they've almost forgotten about those moments, and they obviously haven't chosen to give her a new contract. And I don't know whether that's a mutual thing. We don't know that decision from internally in the club, but regardless, it feels like she's not being back to Arsenal, which does feel, from a fan perspective, really sad. But I guess kind of if we're trying to look at it from a neutral football, what's best for the club perspective, do we think that this is a mistake from Arsenal? Sean, maybe you can speak on this. Do you think it's a mistake from Arsenal? She has had injury struggles and hasn't fully recovered from her ACL yet. Is this just business and it's horrible, but it's what you have to do? Or is this a misstep? And we've obviously got a few comments. Trebuchet saying Viv to City would be a bigger banter moment than Russo to Arsenal. And a lot of people saying their displeasure with this. Is this a bad decision from Arsenal, or is this just a necessary decision and it's unfortunate that because she's at the end of her contract she'll end up going to a rival?
Well, I mean, ACLs are so difficult to come back from, but so many players have done it. You've seen Beth Mead come back in, and she's playing every week. Leah Williamson, Laura Reenhoff's coming back in. And whatever has happened to her, whatever injury, she is still one of the best players in women's football, regardless. I don't care. You just look at her record. That speaks for itself. So to not even offer her a new contract screams big red lights for me as a complete neutral in all this. I don't quite understand why you wouldn't, because if you gave her a contract and she refused, a whole different matter. But to not give her a contract in the first place, I think screams a lot of question marks. But this opens up a whole big summer of everything, because I think one person from City has to go if she is coming in. And I know there have been rumours of Chloe Kelly potentially, because she's got into her last year next year, and PSG were heavily interested a couple of months ago, wanted to make her the highest paid player in Europe apparently, and everything like that. So that could be an option. From an Arsenal point of view, where does this leave Stina Blackstenius? Does that mean she does get a new deal? Because you're going to be another lighter if she goes, but some big clubs are after her. But I personally still don't think City. I can see a situation where Viv Miedema ends up back at Bayern Munich. I just think if Bayern are trying to put together this team, I think they are a Viv Miedema away from telling Barcelona, look, we mean business and we will see you in every European final from here on in. I think it's such an exciting summer as a neutral, but for me, looking at Arsenal, I just think, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Yeah, it certainly feels that way, and a good point from Joe as well. And I think it's kind of raises two questions. City style better accommodates Viv, so there's a chance she thrives there to make it seem an even bigger mistake. So there's A, more of a mistake for Arsenal, but B, maybe this kind of almost hinting at that Jonas is moving away from a style that accommodates Viv. To me, that almost feels like I don't think there is anything that doesn't accommodate Viv because she's just that good of a player. This point's completely right, but I think you keep her in your squad because she's just so good, and she's going to add to any squad no matter what style you play. Polly, we've obviously got rumours around Blackstenius, and then I'm not sure if people have read this, but Tim Stillman, I think, reported today that possible options for Viv replacement would be Caldente, and they also explored Kirby. Is that more red flags? Because that just feels very strange. And yeah, what's your take on this whole debacle that's now going on?
It makes me feel a little bit ill, to be honest. Yeah, it's really, really weird. Like, I understand, okay, you want to get quality to replace Viv, because if you didn't know, she's actually really quality. I don't know if Jonas knows that, so I'll just say that a bit louder. But yeah, Frank Kirby, it's an interesting. I don't really see why someone who's been at Chelsea for so long would then move to Arsenal unless they were going to get a massive, massive pay rise. I could never envision Frank Kirby coming to Arsenal, but you know, yeah, the whole situation makes me quite angry. And I think at first, do you know what? At first, I'd kind of made peace with the fact she was going to leave. I was in denial, but I was also like, do you know what? She needs to do what's best for her career. And I completely respect that. She is my favourite player that has ever graced this earth and will probably forever be. And so, do you know what? I've got to be like, girl, do you think? But as soon as I found out the club didn't offer her a contract, that's where I was really unhappy, because I completely understand that it's a business. Professional sport is brutal. It's horrible. You know, there's not really room for very much niceness. But a player who has been at your club for so long, has dedicated so much, who's done a lot on and off the pitch for the club, who has but footballing wise, has an incredible record, has been, you know, arguably your best player in the last 5-10 years, to just say to her, oh, we're not going to renew it because essentially you don't fit our style, which firstly, Viv Miedema suits every style. Just put her anywhere, she can do it. I think also Jonas, he does have this idea of people don't necessarily fit his system. But I'm like, you know, this sounds really bad, but like, it's not all about you sort of thing. Like your job is to work with the players, and you make them all work together. That's your role as manager. And so just to say you don't suit, get rid of you, I don't quite understand that. I think a move to Man City is very, very interesting for a number of reasons. I think, yes, there is, you know, Man City already have a lot of options up front. So to see where, I mean, Viv could walk into any starting 11, but where she fits in that and how Gareth Taylor would use her, I think is quite interesting. Potentially, yes, outgoings at Man City. From a selfish point of view, it would mean I get to see her week in, week out, but I don't think I really want to see her in a City shirt. So, you know, but yeah, I expected her to go, I think, but just not in this way. And it feels harsh. And I mean, I don't want to like do that whole speculating thing, but from kind of how other players have spoken about it already on social media, you think Viv is really not happy about this. And I feel for her because I know, like we've spoken before about ACL injuries and actually how hard it is to come back from them. And not every player has this linear route back. I mean, it's really rare that a player returns. For example, how Beth Mead has done and has gone straight back to it. You look at Alexi Putea, she's really struggling. And actually, I think it's the club's duty to get her back and not kind of ditch her. And that's one of the reasons I thought she would stay, because she's not like fully back. And so I expected her, you know, her to stay on with them and for them to kind of live out that duty of care. But yeah, it's a real shame. And it just, I think for Arsenal as well, I was saying about end of an era, it feels like a massive change for Arsenal, because you look at the players that have gone in the last 18 months or so, you know, Jen Beattie, Jordan Nobbs, obviously Viv now. It just feels like, oh, okay, actually there's a big group of players who were kind of from, I suppose, the last 5 to 7 years or so. There aren't actually that many left. Obviously, like Kate McCabe's still there, and then Leah Walty came in, but it just feels like there's a lot of change, and I think that's quite difficult. But yeah, love you, Viv.
Yeah, I think it all feeds into that changing era. I think I read Jordan Nobbs and Steph Horton are the only current players still from the first matches of the WSL, and obviously Horton's retired, so Jordan Nobbs is that final one standing. And yeah, I think I raised this point while you were speaking, but it kind of echoes what you were saying. Just this utilization of generational talent. Like, you've got to accommodate. Viv is the type of player you build a squad around. You don't go, not part of my system. And yeah, you look at Beth Mead's age, she's 29 now, and she came into the form of her life about age 27. Oh, wait, what age is Viv? 27. And it's just like, you've got so many years ahead of you. Why aren't you investing in that talent? Because that talent, and I also think that Viv isn't the type of player that is going to get worse with age, because her game has never relied on pace. It's relied on reading the game. That only gets better. And those are the types of players that stay good in the game. The type of players that fade away are the ones that need that youth, pace, energy. And she's not one of those players. She's got longevity. And I think Arsenal could be looking back in a couple of seasons' time, maybe a manager down, and thinking, we backed the wrong person here. But we shall see. And we will move on that note. And we're going to drop down the leagues a little bit now. We obviously had last weekend, just prior to our show last weekend, I think, we had the final games of the National League season for the Premier Division. So we had Newcastle and Portsmouth confirmed promoted. I think this had already been confirmed a little bit, but those celebrations went ahead, and we obviously had some relegations too. Meg, how do you think Portsmouth and Newcastle will fare in the Championship next season. What can we expect from those two teams? Obviously, Newcastle are very different prospect to a lot of clubs that are getting promoted. What do you make of their prospects?
Yeah, look, I mean, you look at Newcastle, who have now done back-to-back promotions in, 2 consecutive seasons, and you look at Portsmouth, who I think finished 7th and then 4th, and then have, rightly sort of deservedly gained promotion. And so there's sort of 2 different complete teams, really. You've got a team who people look at who, they've been heavily backed by, the owners of Newcastle. And I mean, I was looking at Newcastle's squad earlier. I mean, they've got so many players, but a lot of their players do actually have a lot of championship experience, like prior championship experience. And I was looking at Portsmouth's squad, and some of them have, championship experience, but nowhere near as much as Newcastle do. But so Portsmouth will need to, they'll need to have an unbelievable summer and sort of sign some, players that have had, good stints in the Championship if they are to sort of, make sure they do a good job of trying to stay in the Championship. I don't know, how good will Newcastle be? I mean, I don't think they'll have an issue in, I don't think they'll struggle, but I don't know whether they think they can go and try and, push on again and get into the WSL or whatever, because, they may think that if they've already done 2 back-to-back promotions. But I think with a team like that, you can't get ahead of yourself. So they shouldn't sort of set a boundary like, oh, we need to finish, 4th or 5th. They should just sort of, it's their first time in the Championship. So they should almost not set themselves any expectations. I think if you look at the transfer windows, Portsmouth will have to do a lot more than I think Newcastle will have to if they, want to sort of stay in the Championship. I was looking at Newcastle's squad. A lot of their squad is actually not old, but like 28, 29. They've got some young players coming in. But with those older players, obviously, you've got that experience there of the players that have already played in the Championship for, quite a few seasons. So I'm excited to see how Newcastle will do. And now, obviously, you've got the Newcastle-Sunderland rivalry in there. You've got the Portsmouth-Southampton. So in terms of that, the fact that those 2 teams have come up, it'll be, really exciting to sort of see how they fare. And I'll be definitely keeping my eye on the Championship next season more than I have done this season.
Yeah, and I think we saw a super exciting Championship finish. Not quite final day as we might have hoped, but very, very exciting run into the season in the Championship. And I think adding those 2 teams in, especially Newcastle, I'm expecting them to probably invest a lot more again this summer. It's going to be really, really exciting at the top again next season. I think talking about that 3rd tier then, particularly in the North, because we obviously had a bit of a strange season with Newcastle with their going full-time investment. If we're talking about that division, just below that, and I know, Meg, you've got a lot of knowledge on Wolves. We've got Forest, Burnley, Wolves, all very close in that, not top 3, but top 4 after Newcastle. And that's shaping up to be a really good battle next season. Sean, do you think that those rivalries will remain and we'll end up with, just as we had a really competitive Championship finish, even more competitive further down the leagues as well?
For sure. I think one thing Newcastle is a name. There's a Premier League side attached to it. And you look at Burnley is a name, Wolves is a name, Nottingham Forest is a name. And you think, you know what, we see on Newcastle, we may not have the resources Newcastle have, but if we put in a little bit, we can be in the Championship. We can then be one place off being in the WSL. I think that's the driving factor for those teams who have that affiliation in the 3rd tier. There is this little bit of a push that we could do it. I mean, I think Newcastle is a bit different because, I think they brought 2 players in from Crystal Palace who've just gone to the WSL. I think Cataldo's one of them. Like, the other name escapes me, but obviously other clubs can't do that. But it's just that tantalising prospect of, we can do it. There is a bit of budget there. We can just put a little bit over, resources up, and then we are one step away. I think that what makes the 3rd tier that exciting, especially in the North, when you do have those teams that will give them the push to hopefully get in. More money into the women's game is always a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I went to the Forest's last game of the season. They were against Stoke, and the kind of message from their manager in the programme was like, we have invested more this season. Thank you for coming on this journey. We're the only team to beat Newcastle home and away. And I think that it does feel like there is that energy around, particularly that club, from my knowledge, that we can invest more, we can do a little bit better, and maybe we have a responsibility with our team in the Premier League. Obviously, all three of those teams were in the Premier League this season, Burnley not next season, but absolutely, completely agree with that. And then, Polly, we'll move over to the South a little bit, but it reflects the Championship as well. We saw the relegation of London Bees, and this is another team in women's football who aren't backed by the big clubs that we were just talking about. Lewis, of course, relegated as well in the Championship. Of course, they do have a male counterpart team, but it's in the, I think, 7th tier of, yeah, that's correct, 7th tier of men's football. So much lower down, not got the same financial resources. Obviously, Lewis's structure is very notable in itself, but London Bees getting relegated from that, dropping down even further to the 4th tier. Is that a trend that we're likely to continue to see? And is that a shame? And yeah, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we're just going to see it more and more, which is, it's gutting because also a lot of these teams are the ones that were really committed to women's football when actually no one else cared. And so it feels really harsh that they're the ones that kind of suffer as everyone else jumps on the bandwagon. And I look at teams like Durham, for example, in the Championship, give them a couple of years and they probably won't exist in top league women's football, which is really, really sad. But it's the reality. It's the way women's football is going. And on one hand, investment is absolutely fantastic. And yes, it is brilliant, but it also, it causes things like this. And so, yeah, if the men's team aren't in the Premier League or even the Championship, then the women's team are going to struggle. You see Reading, for example, this season, that's kind of the way it's worked for them. The women's team, the first team to suffer as soon as any investment from the men's team starts to fade. And so that is quite hard to see because that's just unfair. It's injustice. But yeah, on the topic of London Bees in particular, the amount of players that have come through their system or have started their career there, or they've just been a part of women's football for so long that it's hard to see them go because there isn't a way back for them. And that's the reality that, there are teams like Newcastle who can put that money in and who can work their way through their leagues. And the one thing I will say about Newcastle, and I can understand why everyone kind of jumps on the hype of them because they are a great team, but actually it's a lot easier to be a professional team when all the teams you're playing in are not professional. That's a lot easier to do. So I think when they get to the Championship, they won't just fly through because they're this amazing team. I think they'll struggle because they'll come up against teams that match them. They'll come up against teams who probably even maybe train more than them, have more facilities and things like that. And I think that is really important because that will give them competitive football. I think, yes, they've had some competition this season, but they've had a massive advantage. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but they've had a massive advantage in the fact that they're being paid. They don't need to, work night shifts at a garage or whatever. They're treated like professional footballers. So yeah, in that sense, I think we'll get more teams like Newcastle popping up and making their way through the leagues, which, it's how it's going to go. And I don't think there's anything that's going to stop that. Lewis as well, it's a real shame, but there's just no way they were ever going to kind of survive because, their men's team aren't in the Premier League or Championship. And I just suspect that's what we're going to see in the next couple of years, which, isn't necessarily fair. But I think the only advantage of it actually is about fan bases. And you can build a sustainable fan base if your men's team already have a strong fan base. It's a lot easier to do than kind of, I look at London City Lioness is a great example. They are also going to disappear because they're not even associated with the men's team. And how do you create like an artificial fan base that's never existed before? So yeah, I do feel for the teams that actually have cared about women's football and now they're going to be in the trenches. But football's a business, unfortunately, and money talks.
Yeah, absolutely. You've changed Emily's mind. She's agreeing with you that Newcastle could actually struggle in that league. So certainly a bit of a change there. And I think all the points that everyone makes. I had a point that I was going to say, and it has now escaped me. So my profound comments now not with me anymore. That was it. Thank you, Trebuchet, for reminding me. I was going to talk about London City Lionesses because I do think there'll be a really interesting case study, because I think you've got, how do you create a fan base? You recruit Rusha Littlejohn, and she won Fans Player of the Season. I don't know how well she played, but I'm suspecting that was because of her own popularity rather than the way she played, potentially. I've not watched a lot of London City Lionesses, but also they've got the women's club owner, Michelle Kang, who wants to invest a lot into women's sport, a lot into women's football, and she's done that with several other clubs. So I think that'll be really interesting to see how a business like that can we have these solo clubs, because as you said, I completely agree that we're going to see a lot of these kind of entities that started when being a women's football club was a relatively cheap thing to do, whereas Kang is approaching this knowing it's probably not going to be a really cheap thing to do and knowing she has financial resources. So will we start to see investors I want to invest in a women's club, I just want to invest in the women's side? I think that will be the first true experiment of that, and I think that will be a really interesting one. Whether it works or not, I kind of hope it does, just because it would be really nice to have more independent women's teams and someone come and invest in Durham before they're gone too. We'll move on to our final part of this show. I'm trying to keep it as close to an hour as I can. A lot of busy people over the weekend to get to bed, I think. Finally, we also have, as well as the WSL ending, we have the League One in France ending this weekend. Arkema D1, I think, is the sponsor. And I'm not a massive follower of French football, but I was frantically searching, and I think they have now changed the way that you win the league now to this kind of playoff structure, where the top 4 teams almost play a playoff as though it was a promotion type playoff, but you just have the final and the winner. So we had first versus fourth, Lyon versus Rennes, and they are yet to play, but they will be playing soon. And then we've got PSG versus Paris FC, and PSG went through to the final. 2-2 draw in that match. They won 5-4 on penalties, so that was super, super close. I'm just wondering, from our panel, Meg, we'll start with you. Do you like this system? It's a bit different. We've got maybe ending the dominance of Lyon, but also feels a bit rogue to have a mini tournament at the end of your league. Do you like that? Do you not like it? How do you feel?
Well, my short answer is no. I don't like it because I think it's currently I only did research into this the other day. I had no idea that the NWSL had like a sort of playoff kind of thing. And I was chatting to Connor about that, and I was like, it's almost like, why is there ever, a league table and, all teams play each other home and away? And then the person the team that finishes at the top of the league doesn't necessarily, they're not guaranteed to win the league. I think that's mental. And yeah, Lyon have obviously, as we all know, dominated, the French league in women's football for so long. But you can't take credit away from them because they're obviously an unbelievable team. And I was looking at the table earlier, and the points difference between first, second, third, and fourth was like massive. And that baffles me as to why, even though the gap, I think, like between first and second, it was like 10 or 11 points. It's like, why should there be a playoff to determine the winner when Lyon are obviously clear winners? Like, yeah, that's purely the only reason why it just doesn't make sense to me. And if it ever happened in the WSL, it would just, I wouldn't like it at all.
Yeah, no, it's very strange. I've just checked, and slight mistake from me. Lyon has now been played. Lyon won 6-0, so it will be a PSG-Lyon final, which is probably what we've all expected. When I was prepping for this, it hadn't been played. It was played last night at 4 p.m, so I'm slightly behind here. But yeah, Sean, do you think it will make a difference to the outcome of the league? And I guess as well, do you like it? Do you not like it? What do you see as the pros and cons?
So I'm part French. I've got family over in France, so I do keep an eye on French football. And well, I will say they aren't afraid to just try some weird things. I mean, you look in the men's league, for example. I think 2 years ago they relegated 4 teams from Ligue 1 and then made it a 20-team league to an 18-team league. Just all like that, 4 relegations. There's a playoff system in Ligue 2 where first gets automatic promotion, then second will play third. Winner of that will go and play second from bottom in Ligue 1, and winner goes up. So they aren't afraid to try something. I know we say Lyon and PSG are the 2 big teams, but if you look at the French Cup, for example, Lyon got knocked out in the semi-finals by Fleury. So there is evidence there that teams in France can compete. I think it's just a little extra excitement. I think if you're trying to make European football a commercialized thing like they do in American sports, this may be a gateway into it to make a big end of season showcase finale for the end of the season. I can see that happening. I know it's been mentioned in the comments about Champions League and what Jean-Michel Aulas has said. I think what they could do is maybe implement a third place playoff, and whoever the losers of those 2 semi-finals, whoever wins that gets the Champions League spot. But yeah, the French are it's very experimental. This doesn't surprise me. I can't quite see it catching on anywhere else, but hey, all power to them. I think they're just trying to make it more Americanized than anything else.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think so. Trebuchet said that this season, correct me if I'm wrong, this season these playoffs do count to UWCL qualification, but next season or from 2025 it won't count, and it will just be 1, 2, 3, and then they'll have the playoffs anyway. So that could be quite an interesting one. Obviously, we saw Paris FC make the group stages this year in the Champions League. Will they be able to do that again? Trebuchet said they like the local because they're a local club one in the Championship, but in the playoffs instead. But Emily says, no, what's the point of fighting for that top spot if you still have to play in the playoff, which is very true as well. Polly, then, in terms of, we've seen a lot of PSG Lyon this season. They played in the league, they played in the Champions League, and they're now going to play again in this to win the league. What are your predictions for the outcome? And have we seen too much of that fixture?
Honestly, it feels like we're seeing it all the time. They must be sick of playing each other, to be fair. I reckon Lyon will do it. Yeah, Lyon, to me, are the better side. I think PSG are good, but, look who's in the Champions League final. It's an interesting thing about the setup of the league because, on one hand, I completely am no, I love how the WSL do it. I just think that's the best way. It's the traditional way. Let's do it. But at the same time, if you are genuinely the best team in the league, then you should be able to beat anyone at any point. So there is that point. But yeah, I understand the thing about there's no point fighting for top spot because you're not guaranteed to win anything. It is quite American, and I'm not a big fan. But yeah, I reckon Lyon will do it. They're a very, very strong side.
I would have loved to see this implemented in the WSL this season because we might have had Liverpool in there, and I do think each team is capable of a loss in that top 4 of the WSL. Trebuchet mentioned as well that WSL needs to pay attention to the playoffs in France because it does affect Chelsea or City's qualification route to the Champions League. So that could add a bit of excitement. But yeah, I think as well, would it be impacted by, say, United, say they were in the top 4, they've just played an FA Cup final. Lyon, of course, have been in the Champions League, and I guess PSG have played equivalent matches. PSG nearly lost to Paris FC. Would we have even more of those complaints where in a one-off match, almost to win the league, you're getting more of those complaints about what about the scheduling? Obviously, Emma Hayes and Chelsea have probably been a bit of a victim of, not a victim because they just done better in more competitions, and that's what you have to do to win more. But there have been those conversations of we've got too many fixtures, and when you're putting the league down to a one match, Meg, do you think that starts to become a bit more of a concern?
Yeah, I mean, obviously scheduling is, I mean, in the men's and the women's game, it's been an issue. But obviously, as you said, you know, Chelsea have got really far in every competition. And so obviously they've been playing more games. And I mean, I think they've just about had the squad to manage that this season. They always seem to have almost like 2 starting 11s really that can probably, you know, win most games. But yeah, I think these, you know, for example, PSG nearly losing to Paris, like, why does that game almost need to be played? Like, it is bizarre. And obviously Paris FC knocked out Arsenal and then also Wolfsburg in the qualifying rounds of the Champions League. So it does show that sort of teams like Paris FC are sort of on the up, I guess. If they're, you know, if they can compete with, you know, the likes of Arsenal, Wolfsburg, PSG, who are, you know, some of the giants of women's football, if you want to call it that. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's an issue for scheduling, but I think, I don't know. I don't think it's a massive issue, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think Trebuchet is saying that we've already seen players starting to be rested in league matches, which almost is like, once you've got those 3-4 spots, unless there's someone you really don't want to play, it does feel like the league becomes a bit more of a damp squib maybe by the end, if you're kind of in that top 4, because you know you're still within a chance of winning, rather than, like, I guess the Chelsea City dynamic that we have at the moment in the league wouldn't be as strong if we had this. So yes, it's got this big kind of crescendo at the end, but you're actually taking potentially attention away from the end. And then Justin from the USA is saying doesn't like the Americanization of the Euro leagues because that's why Americans watch the European leagues. I think for a quick finish to this show then, thanks for everyone who's contributed in the comments, and please do answer this question too. We'll do a roundup. I want everyone on the panel to predict A, who's going to win the WSL, and B, who's going to win League One in France come the end of next weekend. I think one's potentially slightly easy to predict. I think we might have maybe a unanimous call, but Meg, we'll start with you.
I'm going to go with the one that I think so Lyon. I'm going to say Lyon because that's the easier one. Oh, like, obviously part of me wants to say Chelsea, even though I don't want to. I'm going to say Man City. I feel like Man City will do it. I just think Chelsea might slip up.
It will be interesting and harsh, maybe a little bit funny if Emma Hayes ends with nothing in the final season after being on for the quadruple, but of course, big name in women's football and should get a nice send off. Sean, how about you? Your calls for this one?
I think I'm complete opposite to Meg. For me, the easy one is Chelsea. I just see Chelsea doing it quite easy. I just have this feeling PSG have learned so much from playing Lyon so many times, and they've come closer and closer every game. And now for this final one, I'll be like, right, now we've got a plan. Now we know how to go about it. I could just see PSG perhaps nicking it right at the end. But yeah, so I'll go Chelsea and PSG.
I guess you do have the factor as well that maybe Lyon have got their eyes slightly more on the Champions League. So yeah, no, good calls. Polly, how do you sit on this one?
Yeah, I was going to say Lyon will probably have their eyes on Champions League, but I reckon they'll still do it. And then in terms of the WSL, I think Chelsea are going to do it. I think Chelsea will have that comeback. And if they do, someone better make another Star Wars edit because it was absolutely amazing before. I was inspired by Emma Hayes. But yeah, I think Chelsea will just about do it because it is quite a big task for Man City given now goal difference and given that United are probably absolutely shattered. But I think in some ways it would be fitting for Emma Hayes to leave with at least one trophy and just have a nice final day. But I don't know. We shall see. It's very, very exciting though. It's very exciting.
It definitely is. Yeah, I feel like I should probably make a prediction, contribute, and not abdicate my responsibilities here. I think I might agree with Polly on this one. I think Chelsea do have it just about, but I'm here for an upset. Like, I like an upset, so I'm hoping for an upset. I think just for the drama, but I'm gonna say Chelsea at this point. And then I think this one is a tough one because I think PSG nearly had Lyon when they went 2-0 up in that semi-final, and then Lyon just managed to claw it back. I think Lyon maybe have the experience a little bit more when you're talking about finals in that way, having done it in the Champions League. So I'm going to go Chelsea and Lyon on this one. We've got a couple from the chat. Man City will win the WSL and Lyon will win their leagues. Emily, Chelsea and Lyon, Trebuchet, and Justin's thinking one more year for PSG and then they'll do it. So thinking that's a prediction for Lyon. But thank you very much, everyone who has joined us in the chat tonight. And if you're watching, do drop your predictions in the comments and let us know how you found the show. Thank you, everyone, for coming on the show as well at such late notice. Really appreciate it. But we will see you next week, and hopefully we'll have some content out midweek as well. So keep an eye out for that. But from tonight, it's goodbye.